This morning I'm getting over a cold, as I said before. I apologize in advance for some of the hacking, coughing, and things that may interrupt my thoughts and yours as well. I've been syncing the hymns, but I can't do the same thing with the sermon, otherwise it'd be very silent in here. But now I understand what lip syncing is all about. But I do feel the meaning of those hymns. Ever heard of the actor? Well, of course you remember the late actor John Wayne, who once said, "Your foot won't get better as long as you have a horse standing on it." Well, I guess that's a good thing for a cowboy to say in his own imagery. It's pretty hard to argue with that. That's a little like the story who installed the new Venetian blinds, but they wouldn't go down except for halfway. In his irate disappointment and in a rage about ready to send them back, he looked down after having tried it several times and realized he was standing on the pull cord. You've heard that before, I bet. He became exasperated, frustrated over something he himself was doing without being fully aware. Many problems have solutions that are very close to home. Not as close as the end of our noses, but as close as behind our own noses. Meaning in our minds and in our thinking, and a product of our own doing. When we have problems, it's tempting to point fingers, to point them at external causes, taking attention away from ourselves, which is the last thing we need to do, since the problem is in ourselves, and we don't realize that we're just putting off the day, or finding someone else to blame or someone else to fault by pointing at circumstances that are beyond our control. The crippled man we just read about in the Bible, or Barbara read, we listened, had spent 38 years just feet away from the source of healing, and yet there he was unhealed. Incredible. Or maybe not. How many folks do you know, including yourself, if you have the courage to look, who carry personal problems unresolved and unhealed for days and weeks and sometimes years, even though help and opportunities to be healed are close at hand all of that time? We become weary of some of the problems we carry with us, and yet never choose to do the things we could that are totally available to do that would heal and resolve them. When that's the case, we need reminding of the old adage that points to the obvious: if you're doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same results. Choosing to let problems go and choosing not to be healed or to heal them might be compared to building a house on or near the San Andreas Fault in California, where it is known to have frequent small and large earthquakes, then wondering why there are so many cracks in your ceiling. Choosing to leave broken relationships broken and choosing to live with the bitterness, the disappointment, the guilt, and the negativity, the stress, and often the high blood pressure that goes with it, with unhealed conditions like that in our lives, might be compared to the absurdity of buying Atlantic Ocean beachfront property in Cape Cod, where Pat and I, lived for quite a few years, 10 years altogether. I have seen several houses on the Cape, there one day hanging over the edge of a sandy bluff, and then disappeared down below into the water after a strong storm. Happened in Chatham Lighthouse. Some of you may be familiar with that. The number of homes that were washed into the sea, right across from where the lighthouse was. It is puzzling that some folks abuse various substances for non-medical reasons and yet are clueless as to why friends or families and other important parts of their life are washed away. Clueless as to why their bodies eventually show the signs of wear from the poisons that are inhaled and ingested and digested, when in fact healing from such illness has been right on their doorsteps all the while knocking and readily available, offering a whole new world of possibilities and joyful ways of life. It's puzzling why we sometimes fail to exercise and then wonder why our endurance flags. It's kind of like planting one's foot on the pull cord and wondering why the blinds don't go down. It's like looking everywhere else other than at the main causes, or discovering the main causes for the explanation of problems we are having. Strange that we sometimes find ourselves hanging on to problems rather than learning, and it takes learning many times. It's not just a matter of intellect, but learning to let go of them, how to let go of them, and then embracing instead the opportunities to be healed and made whole. The kind of human behavior partially inspired, this kind of behavior, inspired the book written and copywritten in 1938 by psychiatrist Carl Menninger. It's a non-inclusive title. It says, Man Against Himself. Applies to everybody though. Man against himself. It's strange. The crippled man in the account with Jesus tried to justify his unhealed problem by citing external causes. First of all, nobody's here to help me to get to the water. And second, every time I've tried to get to that place, someone else gets there first. There's always a reason. That defense might work for a couple of days, but for 38 years? Sometimes 38 years, sometimes more than that, for some of the things we carry with us unhealed. Well, if only we could always see and be honest with ourselves when we are the ones who need healing from something and have refused the offer so close at hand. We often see the need for healing in others, but not in ourselves. Instead, we are often slow to heal a broken relationship by being the first to humble ourselves and to say, I'm sorry, because it's so hard to do. Slow in going to someone who has hurt us with the wonderful good news, I forgive you. And slow to call the doctor with the symptoms we have. Or slow to admit that we are dependent upon something that is not good for our health. Slow to depart from the circle of friends we have because of the pressure to do the wrong things rather than the right things, for fear of losing the relationships. But you know, peer pressure is not always a wise guide. It's just pressure. So we are often slow to do what we know is right when doing what is right threatens the popularity we have with our friends. Or slow to call the counselor to give a relationship another chance. Or slow to admit that we are wrong and someone else is right. Or slow to admit our part in a fractured relationship when in fact both of us take a part in that. If we could become as good at seeing ourselves at a distance as we are at seeing ourselves or seeing the behaviors and choices that others are making, we'd surely save a lot of wasted time. And healing would happen a lot sooner, and we would get on with joyful, wonderful, fulfilling living. Healing is often as close as taking a good, honest look at how we ourselves contribute to our situation and deciding to make a positive change for the better. It is puzzling how a crippled man could spend 38 years thinking of reasons why he couldn't get to the pool of water where healing was being offered. It's puzzling until we see how we sometimes act that way too, and are similarly puzzled or puzzling. It is about you and me who are resistant to recognizing our need to be healed of anything. Usually, as is usually the case, the story in the Bible isn't about Jesus and a person who needed to be healed. It is about Jesus and you and me when we need to be healed. It is about you and me who are resistant to recognizing our need to be healed of anything. It's about you and me whose reluctance to give up old habits and familiar ways cause the world to be less than peaceful and less just for all. It is about you and me when old habits and familiar ways leave relationships broken for long periods of time rather than healed. It's about you and me when we complain about other people and how some things are not going well in our lives, and yet we do not recognize that healing often requires from within ourselves something to change rather than from without. We overlook the obvious, which is if we keep doing the same things, we'll keep getting the same results, that the Venetian blinds still won't work if we're standing on the pull cord and don't know it. Did the crippled man in the story really have to get to the water in the pool to be healed? As if there was something magic about H2O touching his body? No. That was a superstition of the day about an angel troubling the water in the pool, and the first one to get there would be miraculously healed. He didn't need to come to the water to be healed. He needed to come to Jesus to be healed. Jesus, who was coming to him to heal him. Jesus doesn't let a person continue to play that sort of game, thinking up excuses for why I can't get to the water. The water isn't the issue. It's the relationship of the healer that's at the center of things. And so Jesus says, do you want to be made well? As if to say, there is a way, but do you really want healing to happen to you? Are you ready to experience the change that could be yours after 38 years of doing it your way? And it was when this person accepted the invitation and entered into that relationship with Jesus, with the healer, that he became healed like never before. Just as we all are when we take that leap of faith and we walk with him. Being healed and made well in a relationship with Jesus, he can use us then. His mission becomes our mission. Wow, there's no such thing as being a disciple and having nothing to do. No mission that is ours. We do it together and with him and in his name. God's mission for us calls us out of ourselves to give home to the homeless and food to the hungry and refreshment to the thirsty and welcome to the stranger and justice to where there's injustice, to challenge it right up front. Welcome to the stranger, clothing to those who can't afford it, company to those who are imprisoned, and care to those who are ill, and a whole lot more. So let us, by that, be healed, and be healed for that. Let us turn to that relationship every morning when we get out of bed. Give God thanks for God's being with you. The healer is always right there, standing right next to you. Spirit within you. Just let it be. Let us pray. O God, whose grace of forgiveness and love and purpose heals us all, grant us open hearts to answer yes when you ask, do we want to be made well? Where any of us here this morning have been taking our problems elsewhere and have been trying to heal ourselves by ourselves and by our own methods, trying to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, or thinking that our wisdom is better than yours, speak loudly this morning your question, do you want to be made well? And then, dear God, guide each of us by your Spirit's presence to know and to say yes in our innermost hearts, and to follow you more nearly from this moment forward, walking in the grace of our relationship with you, and in whose name we pray. Amen.